In 1965, the 6th Ward's own Mike Cannavino beat the 5th Ward's Lou Tullio to win a Democratic primary. And the winner was to be Erie's first Italian mayor. Those who know. But for the rest of you wondering how Lou Tullio came to be the face of the city for the next quarter century, this is how it went down. In the 50s and 60s, everyone wanted a piece of what the country was selling. From the tired to the poor, the huddled masses came in droves in search of that better tomorrow.
What you have is an America that is extraordinarily confident. Out of World War II, out of the Great Depression, this is the most powerful, most affluent nation in the history of the world. And there is this profound sense that most every problem that America has can be mastered. And Americans of all stripes and faith are expressing confidence that if there is a challenge, a combination of private and public sector, efforts can meet and surmount those challenges.
Erie was living up to its billing as the Gem City, but there was a divide as people got siloed from neighborhood to neighborhood, and even at times block to block.
You look at the 6 wards in the city and who those leaders were from those wards, how you could carry votes for different politicians in different elections, just by the close, intimate neighborhoods that they had. And then you get into the 5th ward, which sort of attracted people from all over the city to have ultimately moved there. In the more affluent 4th ward, there was definitely a different type of feeling in each of those wards.
In the city of Erie, you have these different ethnic groups. White ethnics are generally going to be Democrats, especially after Franklin Roosevelt, but they're going to be vying with one another for power. They're going to bring with them the old world loyalties, and these are the ties that bind.
Ethnic politics was everything because we had a club system. It was the lifeblood. You won and lost elections in the clubs. And if you looked at city council, you had the Polish seats and, the German seat. And once in a while, you get the Irish seat. But the really clannish, the real organizations, it was the West Side, Little Italy. Little Italy was a community that maintained its integrity way beyond the others. And if you didn't understand that dynamic, you weren't going to be successful in politics.
Oh, I grew up in Little Italy, which was the most fantastic neighborhood in all of the city of Erie. It was like a city in a city. We had our own theaters, we had our own undertaker, we had our own bakeries, we had our own newspaper, we had everything. It was really a fascinating place to grow up. And there was a lot of prejudice against the town. I even felt it in my day, going to high school. I felt it. And it took a long time before the Italians were recognized by the WASP population in Erie, because most of them were not educated. Most of them were illiterate. Mussolini changed a lot of that stuff. Mussolini did anything good. He made education a compulsory thing. Not all the way through high school, but he did make it compulsory for the peasants in Italy. The Italian was not allowed above 19th Street in the tracks. So they had to get the most menial jobs, the immigrants that came over here. We weren't in the housing. You couldn't go there if you were Italian or Greek from South Europe. You couldn't do that.
60 years ago, there was an enormous amount of prejudice from white Anglo-Saxon Protestants, what we called old stock Americans, against white ethnics. And so Italian Americans, amongst many white ethnics, were amongst the most kind of disparaged.
So upper mobility, they tried to get jobs with City Hall, like the Irish do with the police and the fire. These were patronage jobs, and they looked for politicians that would reward them that way.
That really was the backbone of it, is that the way politics worked back then and the way governments worked back then, the way that you got ahead is having access to those jobs that you could give out to your supporters that would turn out people to vote for you the next time you were up for re-election. That was standard practice and not illegal whatsoever. I don't think the Italians in the 6th Ward really knew how to capitalize on their political power until they had one of their own, and Mike Cannavino start to carry the banner for them.
Mike was born on November 11th, 1907, in Scottsdale, PA. In 2 years, his family would move to Erie's 6th Ward, where Mike would attend Columbus grade school.
Mike Cannavino was a plain, simple man, a little guy, grew up in the neighborhood, had a accident when he was went to a sports show and lost his leg. So he had one leg. And the only way he could get ahead, and he was very, very personable, was to get into politics.
Mike Cannavino was my uncle. When he would come to the house, which he did quite often, because my wife was a very good cook and he liked to eat, but the kids, 3 kids, loved him because he just entertained them. And that's all they would talk about. You know, like, when is Uncle Mike coming back?
I can remember one time, though. I have to laugh, I'm sorry. Sitting in a restaurant, he took a knife and he went boom it right in his leg. People got so shocked. You know, what was he doing? He put it in his wooden leg. Oh. He was doing his wooden leg. Ah! People went, ah! That was going in his wooden leg.
He was a kind of a showman. He was very down to earth. His forte was taking care of the little people and really doing whatever he could to help the little people. He served in county government, he served on the school board, he served at city government. He was also a maverick, and that irritated people, and he found himself in the minority quite often on city council because he was willing to be the opposition, the loyal opposition, if you will.
I mean, he cared for people. He was poor. He didn't come from money. He came from the ground. He never forgot where he came from. He was created by his birth, by his experience as a child, by the humble beginnings of his life, and he had that common touch. That meant everything. He fed off of it.
The year was 1961. It was an election year for Erie. The incumbent, Democrat Arthur Gardner, had mulled vacating the seat that Cannavino and others had coveted. However, in the end, Gardner decided to pursue re-election, unwittingly creating a problem for himself amongst his own party. To say Mike was upset would be putting it mildly. After losing the primary, Mike went against the grain and immediately took to cooperating with the Republican candidate, Charles Williamson, behind the scenes. Mike would spend the remainder of his career growing his own support to lead Erie to a brighter future.
Art Gardner and Charles Williamson, they both tried to be non-political in many ways. Well, that meant offending many people who didn't care about the public interest. They wanted, if their son needed a job, if their daughter needed something, if we needed a pothole fixed out in front, we wanted somebody there right away to do that. Speaking of Gardner, he really, to his credit, strong enough in his skin to say, I can either fight these guys and serve in the way that I think is best for the city of Erie, or I can bow into them and have to put up with all that trouble that may come about that. And he clearly made the choice, and he said out loud, I chose to fight him, and it cost him in that election, because Williamson really wins quite comfortably for a Republican in a town that had about a 19,000 voter registration edge to the Democrats.
When Gardner runs against Williamson, Cannavino bolts the party, but he doesn't put his fingerprints on the body. Nobody knows this, but he has his right-hand men, who are City Hall employees, supporting Williamson. And it was a tough race, but Gardner loses. And with him goes that part of the party which was in charge.
If you have a very unified plurality, right, within a particular party, that unified minority, if they stick together, can impose their will upon a divided majority. And, this is what we see in the Erie Democratic Party in the early 60s.
Obviously, Cannavino's calculus was in 4 years, he'll be a weakened mayor running for re-election, and I can use all the resources that I have to come in and pick up the victory in 1965.
Cannavino, like, look, I'm sure he's like, oh yeah, elect the Republican. I'll win next time. I mean, that politicians do that. They're careerist. And is that short-sighted for the city? Yeah, but I mean, he's not the first politician to put himself above the betterment of the community.
One of 8 children, Louis J. Tullio was a real Erie guy from the start. Outside of his time at the famed Holy Cross and a small stint running a dairy farm in New England, Erie was Lou's home, and its connections were all too familiar to him.
Well, and Lou was a guy, he grew up and lived in the 5th Ward, so he's not associated with the 6th Ward. A lot of Italians resented Lou living on the East Side and being a sort of an uppity East Sider. But he was an educated man. He eventually graduates from Cathedral Prep, goes to Holy Cross, has a distinguished career as a college administrator and a business manager for the city of Erie.
Yeah, Lou is a gregarious kind of a person and very much a people person. He rose to become the secretary business manager of the Erie School District, which was the most powerful job at that time. And the secretary business manager did all the hiring. But as a person who did all the hiring, you could create your own power base through a patronage system, and that's what Lou Tullio had done.
Tullio was an ally of Gardner's, and he was a smart politician, Tullio. But Tullio's a neophyte. He's new in Erie.
He feels that with my experience in education and as the business manager and my business experience, that's the type of leader the city's calling out for, and I'm that person. So I want to get out there early and let people know I'm running for mayor, and maybe I can somehow convince Cannavino that he doesn't have the juice to win this time. So literally within a week after the '64 general election, Lou announces that he's running.
A primary campaign, especially in the Democratic Party, right? Especially at that time, it could easily devolve into a family fight. And generally, the Democratic Party, there are family fights and there are family civil wars. And so a primary in, kind of a city like Erie amongst white ethnic Democrats kind of, could easily spill into an ugly civil war that's going to divide the party.
Lou Tullio's sister married a Cannavino, okay? He was from the 3rd Ward, Little Italy. She was from 26 and East Avenue. That gave them a brother and sister-in-law there with the Tullio family and the Cannavino family, which was very interesting in that race we're going to talk about.
Louis J. Tullio was my uncle. Well, it was a traumatic situation for me because, my mother's brother and my father's brother, both uncles running, and I loved both families. In fact, I was a Tullio for 6 years, and then I became a Cannavino when I lived with my grandmother for 6 years. That was a tough move, and moving from the east side to the west side was a whole different ball game for me. It became a little bit of a problem. And especially with the Cannavino-Tullio situation for me, 2 uncles running for mayor is a little bit unusual.
It didn't take long for things to go a certain way. Civility quickly took a hike in the primary of 1965. As Mike and Lou exchanged shots like a bizarro boxing match.
There was one advertisement that the Tullio campaign put out that, we need a Democrat elected that is loyal, that has good physical appearance, that has a good lady by his side, and has good business experience. Well, all 4 of those things touch upon what would be the obvious weaknesses of Mike Cannavino if you were a detractor of his. He was a lifelong bachelor. He couldn't be trusted because he always played footsie with the Republicans when it came time to it, because if he didn't get what he wanted. He admittedly was not a good businessman with his ventures that he went into, and so that was about as bald-faced as you could get.
supposed to be Mike's time. And as such, the Cannavino people were so upset that they actually had buttons that they wore that believed that said OTL, one term Lou, that he was not going to win again. That's how upset they were. And there were these huge buttons that they wore. I mean, it wasn't a little one. It was these huge buttons that were printed up that they, hundreds, maybe thousands of people wore.
There was a saying, the total loss from Holy Cross. Lou Tullio, the total loss from Holy Cross. They would say during the campaign.
Everybody asked me, like, who are you going to vote for? I said, I'm going to vote for my uncle. And I did.
In the midst of everything, the muscle that everyone associated with Mike, his heart, started to show signs of wear and tear.
Cannavino announces in February that he's going to run, and within a month, he has a heart attack. And he's in the hospital for a good month. And it's first reported maybe just had a viral infection or maybe just a light heart attack, a small heart attack that's not going to keep him off the campaign trail too long. But he knew and his family knew that this was a pretty serious episode that he's just had.
I mean, this is how much he wanted to be mayor. He literally sacrificed his health in order to win. I mean, it's really interesting. Men of that era did not take care of themselves. I mean, it didn't help him run as vigorous of a campaign as he wanted to. But maybe, it's just, like, the sympathy vote, that's real.
People felt part of him. And to this day, you talk about Mike Cannavino, it's in your heart, in your heart. I can't really say that about any other political leader in this town. I've known them all. But Mike Cannavino was someone that people revered.
May 18th, 1965, after a grueling few months of campaigning, Mike Cannavino won the Democratic ticket for the mayoral general election in the fall. The city meant it when they said, "I like Mike."
Yeah, I think it was about 744 votes or something like that. But he won, I think, 5 of the 6 wards, some of them quite handily. He had a machine, a true machine, that could turn out the vote when he needed it, and he was able to get across the finish line. Lou, as oftentimes, people that are their first time in, oftentimes they don't win. They give a real good effort, but people just aren't familiar enough with them, and there's enough loyalty to the person who has run before that probably was the difference in the end.
Mike Cannavino won that race because people rallied to him. When you have loyalty for a person, when you have skin in the game with a person, when someone's touched your heart, when someone has given you that enhancement or that feeling, when someone can go into a room and make you feel like you're just as important as someone over here that has $1 million in the bank, that person you're going to go to the grave for.
Mike had never been closer to his dream. All that stood in his way was a weakened candidate in the incumbent Charles Williamson. The odds were in Mike's favor.
Okay, so now you got Cannavino. Labor Day has come, and now his campaign is starting to ramp up. And he, as he has done his whole life, is making social calls on social clubs and bars, and that really is where his campaign is centered.
We had rallies every night in those days. There was clubs in every neighborhood, and every nationality had a club in those days. Like I told you, the Portuguese club. We went to the Portuguese club. We went to the Romanian club. Did you ever hear of that? That's where Bishop Brock is now. He bought that building there. That was the Romanian club. We went down the basement. We had a rally at the Romanian club. I never even heard of these places. Mike always made sure he had a small place to hold the rally. And he would say, I have 2,000 people. And they say, but Mike, you can't get 2,000 people in here. He said, they were coming and going. They weren't all at the same time. They were coming and going. He was something else. There was just something about him.
Williamson and Cannavino, they don't make a ton of appearances together. They have one debate, which the typical byplay of a debate occurs. You know, Cannavino is campaigning as hard as you would expect him to. His health is starting to fail him now. And many people felt that you could just tell the campaign was really taking a toll on him. And if he made it through the election, how long would he last after the election? So there was a real concern about his health, but there was no open talk that he should drop out of the race because he was just so close to it.
It was a huge rally at the I Club. The I Club was on 26th and I don't know what street, Plum or Poplar, one of the streets, the I Club. The building, I think, is still there. Schilling's Carpet used to be there. Remember Schilling's Carpet? Right next door was the I Club. A little place, not big. You had to go up the second floor. And as I said, he always had a small place. Mike gave a speech that night, maybe 25 minutes or so. It held a crowd. It was standing room only in that little place there, standing room only. And you could tell he was all gray, all right? But he looked that way for weeks. So he came down the stairs, and you couldn't even move. The crowd was out front waiting for him, moving. And Jack Fatica takes him home. And the next day, Mike dies. All right. But he really memorized the crowd there. He was really something. I think of those days, he was really something.
I frequent the Y. I was a handball player, and I was at the Y when I got word that he had passed on. And the Y was right across the street from the Lawrence Hotel. It was traumatic. I mean, it was, I believe they even had an extra, a special paper. And my dad, I immediately went to see him, and he just, he was really, really shook up.
At the young age of 57, Mike died 10 days before what was likely the coronation of his lifelong pursuit. With no wife and kids, Mike still somehow managed to leave behind a legacy that goes further than some picture hanging on the wall. With the election so close, the city Democrats were left reeling for solutions. But now, there was one question that came to the forefront. Where was Lou Tullio?
You know, Lou's top aide, Pat Liebel, is downtown shopping. She sees Mike being, wheeled out of the Lawrence Hotel in a stretcher. Joe Roby, who was one of Lou's top aides, neither one of them know where Lou is specifically. They just know that he's at a conference in the Philadelphia area. They
needed to find him, and there was no smartphones or no cell phones, or you can't just push a button and find the person. And they finally tracked him down to, my understanding was, he was, I think in New Jersey, a racetrack, and he was playing the ponies, which he was known to do.
Back then, horse racing was more taboo than you could imagine. It was just not a place that you'd want known where you were at.
When they found him and said, "Hey, you're the candidate. You're going to be running now."
The very next day, he was mending fences. Very next day, he's meeting with the DeFazios. He's meeting with Cannavino people. He's meeting with anybody that will listen to him. Didn't win them all over. Cannavino people never forgot. But Mayor Tullio, to his credit, did the right thing.
With a touch of class not evident in the modern arena of politics, Williamson suspended his campaign as a gesture of respect towards Mike and provided the city with the space to mourn.
Tullio gets nominated. The campaign is suspended on all sides for just a few days anyway until Mike is buried at Calvary Cemetery. But in the end, it was a relatively comfortable victory for Lou, about 2,700 votes. Or you could say that really wasn't much of a victory at all because the Democrats that were elected before him all won by an average of about 4,400 votes. So there was still something there that, people were not totally in love with Lou Tullio. But as history would show us, he became a political force in this town that we probably have not seen since and probably will never see again.
He's a model of a modern progressive mayor who works in partnership with the federal government to bring all kinds of programs and goodies home. I mean, he is both an old world Paul, but also an effective technocratic, politician who is extremely savvy to the ways of Washington. And Tullio he's rightly revered.
Losing that election to Mike Cannavino defined what Lou Tullio became. He never forgot anybody. He didn't forget if something was happening in your life. He never forgot that. And so he learned to be, you didn't learn that in the school board. You didn't learn that coming from the Erie School Board. You didn't learn any of that. What Mike Cannavino learned, he learned. But he learned it from losing to Mike. I firmly believe that.
Mike's legacy? I think he would have been a good mayor, because he was a people person and he knew his limitations. He would have surrounded himself with people that knew what they were doing. A person that got things done didn't care about waiting for red tape. He just went and did it.
As far as Uncle Mike's legacy, people mention to me because of the name, and they ask, were you any relation to Mike Cannavino, and I'm, proud to say yes.
The following 2 decades would be marked as the Tullio era. But for the Cannavino people, the little guys, there was always the question for what could have, or should have been.
With Michael. Michael is the man that Erie's waiting for. He served us well. That's Michael, the working man's pal. Is Michael. Erie's on the move, and Mike has proved he'll lead the way. Who's got to know? It's Michael, and we'll grow with Michael. Cannavino is the man for you and me. So cast your vote, fella, don't you dare miss the vote, fella. I like Mike Cannavino for our next mayor. Hello, Michael, let's all go with Michael. Michael is the man that Erie's waiting for.
Chronicles was made possible thanks to a community assets grant provided by the Erie County Gaming Revenue Authority, Spring Hill Senior Living, support by the Department of Education, and the generous support of Thomas B. Hagen.
This is WQLN.